Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Hello to Carolyn from Ireland, and welcome to Brittany Laidlaw. We're quite excited tonight to have a chat with Britt. We spoke on Monday night about the feminine force rising and the importance of nature in that rising and coming up from the earth. And so it just seems so apt to have Brittany in tonight. And I just really want to read, like some of the things about Britt, because it's quite amazing when you think there are so many different ways we can get in touch with our own nature. Britt is a rewilding mentor. She's a somatic ecologist and an accredited Wayapa practitioner. Now, I had to look that up. That's earth mindfulness and action practice based on ancient Indigenous wisdom. And that focuses on taking care of the environment as a practice of your mind, body, spirit, and earth well-being. So for Britt, it's about using nature to inform us of our deepest authentic self. And I think that's incredibly interesting. And I love this term, eco-somatics. Like, it's just so amazing how our experience of life is just expanding and we're bringing nature into it. So welcome, Britt. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I just feel blessed to be here having the conversation and to be having conversations around this topic that means so much to me, the feminine force. So thank you.
Oh, welcome, Brittany. Welcome. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you because it's really close to my heart. And we were talking about before we came on about like Celtic spirituality and how my own personal journey of kind of awakening to deeper sense of myself was all around returning to the wilderness in the west of Ireland and buying a cottage and renovating that and getting back to my own truth, and then really connecting on a deep level with nature. And nature informed me of, I suppose it was kind of speaking to me about my purpose and what I had to do in the world and problems that I need to solve and stuff. So it was just really exciting to hear your connection with that, and really looking forward to you unfolding your story. It'd be amazing to find out, because I know from your website as well, which you have an amazing website. If everybody wants to go on afterwards, I have to check it out. It's just fantastic. Being a designer, I was really excited by it as well. But I could see that like your journey has unfolded from quite a different background to where you are today. So I'd love you to kind of maybe give people a bit of context on what's inspired you to be kind of working where you're working now and offering this to women around the world, please.
It's something that I've actually reflected a lot on, because as my work evolves and changes over time, I've kind of been, as we all do, we pull on the key threads that are becoming more important for us. And something that has been a consistent theme throughout my entire journey has been this walk that my body has been asking me to go on. And yes, I can talk about, my beginnings in permaculture or my beginnings in dance. But when I've really peeled back the layers, as I've started to do just recently, even deeper, it's actually been my menstrual cycle and my health challenges as a woman with regards to my relationship to my internal feminine cycles that are a reflection of the earth cycles outside of me. That has been the biggest guiding force for the work that I do. And a summary of that really has been I had a lot of trauma as a young woman around relationship to my body. And that affected my menstrual cycle really quite significantly, with reproductive issues, a lot of emotional baggage that was really suppressed and caused a lot of disease and trouble. And it was through my healing journey, she being my womb, has really led me on the path to where I am now, in that she was the guide for my rewilding process. So when I started to actually try to heal myself naturally after doctors saying, oh, no, you can't have children. Oh, no, you're actually postmenopausal when you're 21 years old. You have to take hormones for the rest of your life. I then said, no, I'm going to actually pursue a more natural way. And I had just an intuitive guidance to do that. And that led me to, really deep cellular healing through organic and good, healthy food. And that introduced me to the world of permaculture, which is a system of ecological design, all about how we not only heal our bodies, but the way that we produce food, the way that we design our villages and our culture is actually healing the earth herself too. It restores the ecological systems that feed us and nourish us and house us and all the things. And so I taught that for many years because it was so transformative for me. And then that led me even deeper to like, okay, now I'm really getting back into what it is to be a real human, connected to the cycles of nature, you know, housed and cared for by nature. And I found this world of what I now call rewilding. And it was like the missing piece finally dropped in for me. And in order to kind of transition, because I thought, oh, I'm stuck in this permaculture. It was wonderful, but I think I was doing it to
escape.
In some ways, I was doing it. Yeah, I was doing it as a save the world type young woman. And what led me to I had my own breakthrough moment, which was my ultimate form of rewilding. And that led me to all the bushcraft survival skills, which was even deeper than planting a seed. How do you actually go out into the wilderness? How do you go out into the unknown and trust that everything that you need is inside of you? And that's the ultimate form of really rewilding self. And there's so much metaphors in that. So that's how I came to be where I am, is that those inner wild cycles that are operating in my body have led me back to the earth and what I'm doing today. And that's why I'm so stoked to be here, in terms of that is the feminine force for me. That is her guidance that she's calling us into more and more to come home.
I just think that's amazing, like the trust, because I found anyway, like the deeper and deeper levels of trust that I have in myself and of this divine guidance, and allowing life to inform me all the time. But you're showing me this total other level, like going out into the wild and trusting that we have everything within us. That is something that freaks me out a little bit, to be completely honest.
Not alone.
I'm like, oh, I'm just not sure that I could do that.
You have to get out of Sydney.
Well, it's interesting because even now, a lot of this movement is becoming more and more popular. There's TV shows like Alone, and there's all sorts of interesting things now coming more alive in a social space. But
it might get cold and uncomfortable and like all those things.
We have to definitely help Lisa.
I did camp around India for 3 months, right? And that was rough as anything. So I know I can do it, but it's just like, especially Tasmania. Like we're talking, so you're going out this weekend too, Britt. And I was thinking, this is Tasmania in the middle of winter. Like I'm not really partial to cold. And Carolyn, you'd be fine at that.
Yeah,
especially
the west of Ireland. It's always windy and it's really wild. That's fantastic. I actually think that's just so amazing. But actually, I saw it as an experiment. Like it was research project. I could see the way we were going in culture. I could see how we were completely lost. And I thought to myself, like, I'm a problem solver as a designer, we go into research. For any project, you take on huge research. You find out everything you can about it. Then you start to see what the problems are. And then you're trying to find the solutions. So for me, I was looking at humanity and where are we at this stage in time, and how have we got to where we are now, and what's our thinking has got us here. And I also researched like the whole pathway of human thought throughout time, from ancient times up to now, and seeing where our cutting edge of our thought was. And I realized that, I was really interested to see, like, what does a human being really need? Like, what do we really need? That was my question. And I kept kind of letting go of everything that I felt I didn't need. So it was like gradually letting go. And what was really, really interesting was that as I let go more and more, my life got richer. And it was like as if the opulence on the outside world was this kind of fake opulence, where I came away from like the beautiful homes in Dublin and the chandeliers and the richness of the material world, when I actually paired that back down to the wild and back to the wilderness and back closer to nature. There was a true richness that came in that was like something that can never be taken from you once you connect with it. It was deep inside, and it was like this homecoming and coming right back to who you are in your essence. And then once you come back into the world again and find to be, living comfortably or whatever in an environment that suits you, and to live your purpose, but that richness can never be taken from me now that I've found it, you know. So, you know, it's not that you have to live in a cabin for the rest of your life. It's just a journey of rediscovery. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just an amazing experience of transformation. I think if anybody takes it, yeah.
I absolutely agree. And for me, there's no expectation for all the women that come on my programs. There's no expectation that people are going to go and run away and live in the woods. And that's not just the reality of many, many people, not even including myself. I love to go out in the wild, and I also love sleeping on my lovely mattress. You know? But the power, or the knowing that I can, gives me a kind of power that is undescribable until you've had an embodied experience. To know that no matter what's happening in the world, in my life, I've got me, and I have a deep allyship with this force that is the most powerful force there is, nature herself. I've got allyship with her. I'll be fine. There's nothing else that people can take away from me. There's, you know, I'm thinking of the time when all these, you know, the world shut down recently with the pandemic and everything. And I was actually surprised of how resilient my nervous system was compared to a lot of people I knew, who, you know, there's no judgment of where we're at. It was a pretty horrible time for a lot of people in terms of the hit that our nervous system went through. But something that I was reflected on, just as my own interest and witnessing, was that I noticed that my nervous system, all of those kind of primal needs for shelter, survival, all of the stuff that was brought up, you know, having enough income to feed our families, changes of income, all of that was going on. And I felt so deeply calm about it because I thought, I'll be fine. And there's a power in resilience of that, you know, that no one can take away. And it's a good question to ask yourself. I love all those, you know, beautiful, I love going for massages and having my hair done and all the things. But who am I really when all of the layers, all of the opulence is stripped away? Who am I really? Yeah. What is my purpose underneath all that? Because this is also a big question. I think a lot of people think that our purpose is something that we do. And we're defined by, you know, what we're doing in the world. Where our true purpose, in my opinion, is something that's informed or emerges out of us as part of our ecological role here on the planet. It's something that comes up through us, through the earth. And knowing what our purpose is, which is a state of being, not a state of doing. If I lose my legs, if I'm in a car accident, if I'm forever changed in some way, I never lose my sense of purpose as long as I have my relationship to the natural world, which is something that never leaves me. And there's an incredible power. There's an incredible sense of resilience in that. Because I love what you shared about, you know, peeling back the layers as to what do we really need. And in my opinion, connection is a huge one. Belonging, feeling like we have a place and a community that we actually feel deep belonging to, and a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning beyond, you know, the frivolities of life. So they're the key things that can never be taken away from us if we do the work to find them when all those layers are stripped back and we come back to the raw humanness of who we are.
Yeah. There's a calling in me now, Britt. It's almost like, because like what I'm seeing as I'm listening to you, it's like the understanding that I have and the connection that I have, it's like this other level of getting into the real rawness of nature with nothing else but myself. So I can be in that place wherever and feel very comfortable and at ease. But how would that be if I went out into the wild? And you know, so it's almost like I can see it like this part of me going, oh man, really? And the other part going, yes, this is what we've got to do. It's like, you know, but that's life informing me. And I sort of, I would love to ask you more like this concept of allowing nature to inform my authentic embodiment. What does that look like in reality? Like when you're out there in the wild with women, how do they connect with nature, and how do they allow that to inform their deep, authentic embodiment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I want to quickly peel back to because it's something just came up what you just shared about like, oh, the cold and facing all the challenges. And it's interesting that I find nature herself is an amplifier of what's in you. And I tell this to the women who mostly come with a deep fear of being alone in nature by themselves, as I also had for many, many, many years. Fear of being alone in the dark, fear of the terrible weather, whatever it is. And I always say,
sharks. Mine is sharks, so I'm probably going to be all right in the wild.
I always say, whatever, if we're truly to believe that we are everything, so we are nature, there's no separation, then whatever I'm fearing out there is a part of myself that I'm not accepting, is a wild part of my own psyche that I have not yet integrated or offered enough love to, and I'm not willing to look at. And so those crazy storms that I don't want to go out in, you know, how do I actually, what's my relationships with my own internal storms? You know, am I willing to be with the dark night of myself, all of the darkness in my own psyche? Can I be with that, sit with that? Because nothing out, I used to think there was something out there coming for me, you know, that there was some scary thing out there that was coming to hunt me down in my tent. And I realized it was the part of me that was seeking most to be loved and integrated by me. That was my own wildness wanting to be integrated into my internal ecology. So I wanted to just mention that part, because it's a big piece for a lot of women, and often inhibits why we don't do these kind of adventures. But to answer your question about like, how do we get to that place of embodied authenticity? And this is a huge question that I've asked.
I'm sorry.
It's great because it underpins my entire research. A big part of this journey that I'm doing, called The Longing, it's a 6-month journey for women, I'm actually using as a case study to back my current PhD research in eco-somatics, because the whole journey is based on a framework that I developed called the Earth Framework, which is my attempt to answer this very question. And the Earth Framework is a map, let's call it. So every good journey into nature requires a map. And it's my map for how we come back into embodied relationship with the earth. And we do that through the sensual, through our relationships with our own body, our primary ecology. And this map I've sat with, it has been developed through sitting with nature and observing the patterns that show up over and over and over again. It's actually just talking to the women in my program last night when we started. And we mapped this out in a what I call the wheel, the cyclic wheel. And we looked at the sun cycle, the moon cycle, the plant cycle, the seasonal cycle, our menstrual cycle, our life cycle. And what we see when you overlay all of those cycles on top of each other, we have the same exact archetypal patterns repeating themselves over and over and over again. So how do we come back into relationship with those cycles? We start listening to the pattern showing up and we follow it. And so that's how this framework that I developed, called the Earth Framework, it's an acronym, and it follows this pattern language that I've observed. Not saying it's correct, that's the whole point of the PhD, is to test it out. But it's my attempt to utilize those patterns and apply them into how we come back into embodied relationship. So it's an acronym, E being energy map, all about the fact that it's like that springtime energy, that birthing energy. How we begin things matters. This is why setting intentions at the beginning of things matters. If we're able to understand that, you know, our birth imprint, the first day of our bleeding cycle, how we treat our little seedlings in the garden affects how they're going to grow. Beginnings matter. So we can actually harness the energy of beginnings and chart that course of how we want it to go. So energy map, understanding the way energy works. A is allies. Let's, you know, this point is that peak between between spring and summer, that cusp of, you know, as we're moving into daytime, as we're moving towards full moon, as we're moving towards through that adolescent period in our life cycle, where we need allyship, extra support. And in this part of the practice, or the process, it's all about the nervous system. Because if we're doing this alone, what are our allies? It's all of our internal anatomy that's trying to support us all the time. What are those internal allies and external in the ecology that we call on? I have a little system that I do. Is our amygdala, our neurochemistry that's happening, our alpha brainwave state, animal allies, our ancestors, astrology, all of these things, all of these systems that are here to offer support and allyship. So when we go through a journey of reconnection like this, we don't have a blow your head off type of transcendental experience that you can't integrate. So these are to support you to be able to have a grounded start, and like how we support our adolescents through that really formative time, through mentorship, through extra attention and love, providing that support and model and mentorship. R is remembering, member being our bodies, reconnecting with the deep language of our body. And this is all about the sensual, not just the sexualities. I also break this apart in the actual program. Is our sensuality and our sexuality are two very different things, related, but very different. Our sensual is simply our sensory relationship with the earth. And that is how we communicate with the earth. And so we actually, this whole piece in eco-somatics is about, we can't reconnect with the earth and have these deep lines of communication that all earth-based cultures do and we once did, that we rely on for guidance. We can't have those clear lines of communication unless we understand how to communicate with our own bodies, unless we understand the sensory language of our primary ecology. And so there's no hope of reconnecting people with the natural world if we're not reconnecting with this natural world. So that's the remembering process, reconnecting with self. Then when we reconnect with self and start feeling ourselves and start understanding that language, suddenly we feel all the things that we don't want to feel, that we've repressed for the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in our lives. And all of that emotional content, all of that stored energy has to move. Energy in motion, if they're being emotion. And it's an opportunity to essentially transmute the TH in the earth framework. It's EARTHED. The TH is we transmute all of that personal pain, those wounds and challenges and our greatest fear that we begin to touch on, and we transmute them into our personal power, which become the harvest as we're moving around that cyclic wheel of the calendar. This is the autumn time. Things are changing, the leaves are dropping, we're letting go of the stuff we've been holding on to, and the result is this big juicy pumpkin, the harvest of our hard work to share with our community, to the wisdom that we share with our community. The wound becomes the gift in this process, and it also cleans out the gunk from our pipe, let's say, or our channel. So the E, which is the next stage, is called emergence. And that's where suddenly this line of communication, of embodied relationship and kinship, is freely flowing again with the natural world. And we have what's called emergence, in which our purpose arises up and through us from the earth through our clear communication with her. And emergence in science, this is my little nerd hat going on. Emergence in science is what happens when we observe the difference between an ant colony and a single ant, or a single bird flying and a flock of birds. And a single bird flying alone will behave very differently, same with an ant, than a colony of ants or a flock of birds. And what happens when we see a flock of birds, I'm thinking of this gorgeous, like a flock of starlings or something moving in the sky, dancing, is this collective consciousness emerges, where there's no leader, there's no follower, there's this beautiful dance that we're entering into, where every bird in that flock is serving its purpose, and in serving its purpose, it is contributing to this beautiful dance that is unfolding, that serves the whole. Same thing with an ant colony. Every single ant in that colony has a specific purpose, a role that it embodies, and through its embodiment, it's contributing to the whole, and there's a collective consciousness that arises, which also gives the ant purpose itself. So one to wrap your head around, but essentially the idea is that our emergence is that emergent property. Our purpose is the property of our relationship with nature. And then we get to D, which is death and digest. how do we relate to death, to letting go in that final decomposition process, and allow that old identity to die, and also digest. This is the integration phase, the phase that's often forgotten, and it can often be the hardest part, on a practical sense, when you go through a really profound transformation, when you feel like you're going through an identity shift or big new insights come through. How do we take that back to our community or our family and feel like we're safe to have this new skin, to be back in our wild pelt without shrinking back into our kind of domestic selves or our tamer selves that are more acceptable to society. That's that phase. So it's my crack at it. And it's linear. It's, I described it as a linear process, but ultimately it's a spiraling one, as all good cycles are. And that's where I've come to so far in how what that journey looks like into embodied relationship with self that informs our purpose and our state of belonging.
Oh, Brittany, that is so amazing, actually, because that speaks to my whole journey. So if you wanted to use me as a research subject, absolutely, because I've been through all of that, and actually the analogies that you've used there, like often used with Lisa as well, and actually the whole journey, it's amazing, because I have a poem, because before I called being a designer, but I'm also a communication lecturer, and I was asked to be director and to go on do a PhD in design, and I said no. I chose to do this my inner PhD. I have a poem about it, actually, and it's funny how you just map the whole process that I went through, and it's just absolutely amazing. And last night I got out a poem that I hadn't actually shared with anyone yet, and it's about the harvest time as well. So, and it's like all the cyclical cycles in Ireland with the Celtic, our understanding Celtic wisdom is broken into 6 week cycles. So every 6 weeks there's a different transition. So they used to have festivals every 6 weeks to bring people along in that understanding of the harmony of nature, and put people being in harmony with that too. So it was so connected constantly. And for me, the journey has been like that. When it just echoes to when I was a child. I grew up in the countryside, very close to nature, always one with nature. And I always had that, even since whole life, that natural connection to nature. So I always get informed by nature. It's like this, like what you were talking about, the embodiedness. So I just get information from what's going to happen. It's like as if I'm an animal and the environment informs me, So before it's on the news, I nearly know if there's a shift if there's a war coming, or even before COVID came, or anything like that. I get it. I know there's a shift. There's something happening. There's something new. The change in the atmosphere. It kind of informs you. And in Ireland as well, we know that Ireland itself was named after a goddess, like Era. So it's basically as if in mythology that, I suppose, like as if she speaks to us. She tells us what she wants, what she doesn't want, what's happening. It's a constant conversation with that connection. And also when you were talking about going back with the body and the cycles with women, it's all about the moon as well, and the movement of the natural moon. That's part of our culture too. And it's just, personally, I know all that, but my personal journey has totally mapped exactly what you said there. So it's just like, absolutely, that's amazing that you're doing a PhD on this, because to have guidance like that for people who are just maybe midway through that, or not really understanding that this is happening for them, I think that's so vitally important, because it can be so foggy and not understanding the journey that you're on, and where you are in that journey, and where you're to come. And a lot of the time you think that you could be done and you're not. You've a good bit more to go, and like we always have more to go. But I just think that is a fantastic asset to be able to kind of bring that to people in a map, like you say. I just think that's really, really amazing. So well done on that. Very exciting.
And it's I second that. I mean, I think my personal journey has also mirrored what you've said there, because I'm really into emotions and bringing our understanding that the way we feel is fuel for our creativity and for our being on this planet, you know. And without being, and my experience is being able to feel, which I didn't really do until I was 37. Having this, I had an awakening which started me feeling, but then there was an embodiment process. And I think you're absolutely right when you say we've had a lot of cultural, you know, like ooh-ah around a spiritual awakening, but really we're in a body, and it's not until we embody that and integrate that. And for me, it was this process of really feeling and sensing myself in my life and being able to use my emotions, because, and this is like I feel sometimes I'm the advocate for people's feelings because they get such a bad rap, and it's like actually they are our power. If we can use them and understand them, they become the fuel for our power and our genius and our connection. And that's exactly what you're saying. So I just think that the way you spoke that was just so clear, and you know, absolutely, it's just so clear and so perfect. And my journey is just a reflection of what you've said to it. It's beautiful. Like it's so heartening. It's just great.
I could talk about. I'm so excited to be able to have more time connecting with you as you know as our relationship unfolds, because I could talk about this till the cows come home as that our emotions and our feelings are the source of our power. It's something that we've been disconnected from for so long, and it's actually the biggest creative fuel for our purpose in life. And there's so much in that. But something that came through actually as you were sharing, Carolyn, and it weaves into both of what you were sharing actually, is particularly the feminine journey into purpose with relationship topic around emotions and things. But it just jumped into my mind because you were talking about myth. So myth has been such a huge influence for me in the stories, because what I think of what we've modeled predominantly in our culture in terms of people's relationship to purpose is what I frame as the hero's journey. You know, the hero sets off and climbs the mountain and slays the dragon, and that's why the journey that my partner runs is called the leap, because for men it's very much about that. It's like they're leaping off into the journey and they're climbing the mountain. And when I've picked apart all of the ancient mythology around this kind of journey into purpose for women, it's very, very different. The heroine's journey, I say this, the heroine's journey is not the hero's journey in a skirt.
Yeah, wow.
Brilliant.
It is a descent. It's a descent to the underworld, to exactly what you're saying, of actually looking at all of our biggest challenges, our big emotional content, and diving into that and transmuting it into our personal power. So it's actually, you know, instead of climbing the mountain and slaying the dragon, we are dropped into the depths, the deep, dark aspects of our psyche and all of those challenges. And through actually traversing through the muddy swamps of what's down there, we build our resilience. We build our kind of unfuckable nature. It's like superpowers. And we arrive, the mud on our face and all scarred up, and say, I am absolutely empowered that no matter what no matter what happens to me, I'm not controlled by my emotions. So coming back to that idea of, you know, people embody their authenticity. In my opinion, the only reason why we don't embody our authentic soul, aren't free in our wild self-expression, which is what essentially I'm trying to get to for women who go through my journeys, is because we've been, you know, I use the language of domestication, but it's not about, we've been stuck in a house. It's essentially being controlled. But you know who the controller of ourselves is ourselves. Because we think there's all of these things that I should be this, I compare myself to this, and therefore I'm controlling myself and squashing my authenticity because I'm you know, performing a role that I think I need to play. I'm controlling my emotions, I'm controlling my feelings, and what that's doing, it's just numbing me out. And that's the process of what blocks our authenticity, is our sense of control, of holding on, because we're afraid of actually being seen. And if I'm really seen in my authenticity, then I won't be loved. So the power of the descent is we actually look at all of that baggage that has you believed that you won't be loved if you're really seen in your authenticity, and unpacks it all, gets all of that emotion of probably our childhood stuff and all of the reasons why you control yourself. And when you're liberated from those, then you can be your authentic self, because you're not controlled by the things that you want to keep hidden. And so that's really the journey into wildness. And it can be done so many ways. I was actually just writing a piece of poetry saying, in order to be a wild woman, you don't have to go out into the wilderness. It's powerful because it's the easiest pathway, because it's right in your face, all of those parts of yourselves, the wild storms and the unpredictable nature of it. So it's the right environment to explore those things, but you don't have to do those things. It just requires that descent and a willingness to go into those places where we believe that we're unlovable, and explore why we believe unlovable. And then we become liberated from the chains, the domestication, let's call it, that we've done to ourselves that stops us from being our authentic selves.
I love that. That's so amazing. I just love it, because I call it archaeology, digging deep, going under like that as well, the underground, the underworld kind of thing, and just dig deep, keep digging until you find your truth. And it definitely, for me, like that, it's going down rather than going up, and I felt actually as I went down, my perception went higher, so my awareness automatically, the more deeper you go, the more your awareness rises. So it's actually, maybe it's just we go down, maybe the men go up, and then they go down. That happens. It's a polar thing, a polar opposite. We're polar. I suppose that's what the male and female is. They're polar opposites. But I think that's just so amazing, and I definitely agree with that. That you can sit in. For me, I'm contemplative, and that's why I try to teach contemplation, because opposed to meditation as such, because it's about deepening our understanding of ourselves and going down, rather than checking out, checking in, and checking into like how, and using our life and our environment in our domestic role even as a mirror to that, so when you spend time to contemplate, and then it's mirrored, and how do you put it into practice then in your daily life, and how do you connect more authentically to, like we talk about with your daughters, with your family, with your everyone. So you're doing the deepening, but you're putting it in your contemplation, but then you're putting it into practice. So it's about having your eyes open and being awake in your world, in your life. And also, like, what I love what you're saying there as well is about freeing ourselves. And I wonder, like, I feel that it's actually women talking about how women do that and how we can free ourselves, taking the men out of the equation completely, and saying that, because a lot of time we're doing it to ourselves as women are reinforcing the bondage all the time, and like, how can we can give ourselves permission to be authentic, and it's like this conversation that we need to have. And that's why we started this as well, to open it up to women to become more authentic, and to show that they're not perfect, and that it's okay, that women will accept you as well, because you're afraid. There's this fear as well of being outcast from, your friends and everything as well. This connection, once you break the chain, what happens then, because there is this kind of, will I be accepted with my friends? Will I, my community that I have at the moment? And how do I find my way through that, and have you found that, Brittany, with women as a fear as such as well?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of fear that comes up in general, I think, because this is, this is facing all of the stuff that's most challenging in our lives. It comes up because all the comforts that surround us, so where we don't have to look at that stuff, are gone. And so it's like right there in our face. I'm thinking too of when you were sharing too, actually, in terms of, well, there's so much coming through, but I was thinking of when I teach fire, and I teach fire, how to make fire with your hands. And you know, lots of people say, why do you need to learn how to make fire with your hands? We have a lighter. Like, we're never going to go back in time where we don't have access to the things that we can create fire out of. And even my partner says that. He's like, I don't get it. But the reason why I teach it is it's because it's such a powerful metaphor for facing big fears. You know, and this is often a big part of the feminine journey as well. It's not the taking things head on. It's actually the embodied journey and the mythical journey that we go in, which sometimes always isn't the direct path. It's the breadcrumb version. So we don't have all the answers given to us. We actually develop that through our own embodied experience. And so that's why, you know, the work that I do, I weave a lot of crafts into it: weaving, fire making, shelter building. There's layers upon layers of why they're included, but that is a big part of that. So people have direct contact to meet their fears, not in a like, all right, let's go slay the dragon, like that kind of masculine version, but actually, how do I be with all of the fears that arise in my body, that, you know, bring up all the stories as well, and work through that with my body. And often that's, you know, through their crafting of fire and things. I actually love it when I see, a bit of a weird person, but I love it when I see women trying to make fire and they're in tears or they're screaming and want to throw the thing against the other side of the, you know, the other side of the sandpit or whatever. And because I know that they're getting into relation with all that suppressed emotion, that if we're sitting around and talking directly to it, maybe it'll come up. But when we're activating our bodies and facing all those fears and all those stories about how we're not good enough and I'm comparing and, oh my God, they can get fire and I'm a total idiot with this stuff. I should just go back to, you know, Netflix. Go back to my comfy home. All the stuff that comes up with that. I love witnessing people, because and this is I know that my purpose personally is a midwife. So it's that moment of when, you know, when a woman is birthing, of actually coming in, like I do it metaphorically, when she's all like, I can't do this. I've got all the stuff, all the conditioning that says I can't do this. I'm afraid. What if I die? What if what I want to create in my life dies? What if all this stuff? And it's just a hand holding going, you've got this. You know, you've absolutely got this. Your body knows exactly what to do here, and trust that. And then seeing women stick at it through all of those fears, through all of those hardships, and then literally birthing fire, which is a metaphor for creation in their life, and understanding that they did that through their body. They did that through their own persistence to birth themselves through the pain, through their fears. And through that, they literally created something that never existed before. And that's power. That is feminine power. That's the feminine force. And so, that just came through as you were sharing, and with regards to seeing people go through that embodied process of facing fears.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I know when I work with people's emotions, it's almost like women have these perceptions, and it's almost like as soon as you can show them what's really going on, which is what, you know, you've said, they come face to face, but when they can see, they get to see out of the fear what's really happening, and they can go, wow, oh, this is so good, I feel so powerful. And it's like, and you use that beautiful metaphor of the pumpkin, you know, I love that. It was like when everything, you know, all the leaves dropped off, I was like, there's this beautiful pumpkin, you know. And I often say, and we're talking about midwifing, because Carol and I often use that term too, like we feel like midwives, you know, bringing women through. But it's like, for me, we avoid our feelings in this moment. We just don't want to deal with them because we think that they're so painful and it's so hard to do. And I don't know what it is in us that thinks that it's actually going to be better 3 years down the track. Like, how can we not think that of course it's going to be worse if we don't deal with it now? Like, why don't we think logically like that, right? And I see, as I'm working through emotions with women, it's like, I can see it's like a birthing. And when you're in, like if you're in labour, for women, some women that have been in labour, they know there's a point where you just have to let go and you can't do anything, and it's horrible and you think you're going to die. But what you get at the end is a baby. You know, you get this reward. And so I think it's beautiful, these metaphors, because it helps women find meaning in what they're going through. So they don't have to wait. You know, that story of, oh, when we're given equal pay, or when we're given this, when we're given that, we'll be empowered. Like, stuff that. I want to be empowered now. I want to feel empowered now. I don't have to wait for anybody else to do it for me. And I think that being able to use the story and the myths and the metaphors, you know, like, it's just, oh, it's so encouraging. I feel so like, oh, juicy.
It is a big thing of not waiting for some external source of authority to fix you, you know, to rescue you. That like a lot of the myths and things are around this idea of us being rescued, of the damsel in distress.
And it's subconscious, isn't it?
It
like
is.
It's a subconscious thing. Because I discovered that in me, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm actually waiting to be like, it was so unconscious, because it was part of this like over. And when I could see it, I just realized, wow, how could my partner even take his armor off if I'm still waiting to be rescued? Like, he can't, because he's got to be ready to fight the dragon, because I still need to be rescued.
Yes, that's a brilliant point, because that's what we've talked about as well. And I really feel that when women get in touch with that deep sense of themselves, it actually helps the masculine rise as well, because they can't, if they have to be in that protective, shielding us and protecting us all the time, they can't do that innate work in themselves, you know. So they can't, you know what I mean? It's like they need a chance to have that retreat as well, and they need us to feel safe and stable and secure enough in ourselves, so that we can be kind of emotionally stable for them in that journey too, you know. So, and that when they want to go out on the hero's journey, that we're okay at home, we're happy, you know, or, you know, we're doing our work, but it doesn't look the same. It might be more introspective and less kind of external. It's more internal, you know, in the world. I think that is really important, because that creates balance. That brings the balance back, you know, because if it's imbalanced and we bring the balance back, it affects the other as well. So I just think that is amazing, because it's also then, it's when we get in touch with what we want, what we need, you know, we want what our purpose is. And we often talk about repositioning. Like, I feel like it's this big repositioning, everyone getting into their place, their rightful place, that you find the true partnerships, and the partnerships that are supposed to be, or that are healthy, and that really support society and create this really strong structure in society that is kind of building this new world, you know, that has this harmonious relationship and sensory relationship with life, like with the birds that we were talking about, because we're in synchronicity. And it kind of is very synchronistic when you get to that level of understanding what you're attracting in is more genuine to who you are in your authenticity. So it has huge, massive effect. Not just when the women do that work, it just has a huge effect on the whole ecology of life. You know, it's just so powerful. I think, you know, amazing, isn't it?
Something that I find really interesting too, in observing on that cultural narrative of like that makes us better in our relationships, is in our culture at the moment, in my perspective, we've replaced our spiritual devotion to nature and how that helps us have relationship with our own eros and our own sexuality and vitality. We've replaced our devotion to nature as our source of that with our relationship to our partner. And the fact is, our partner will never be able to fill that role for us. That was always the role, as throughout history, that's meant to be filled by our relationship with life itself. And so I've found in my personal relationship, the more I've actually, instead of outsourcing that sense of wholeness and sense of, you know, my relationship to my sensuality, my eros, my vitality, and my essential, like my devotion, when I've actually diverted, when I've honored the fact that my partner's a human being and isn't some, you know, person that isn't a flawless God. When I can actually place that into my deep relationship with nature, I then don't come to my relationship needing as if I have a big hole in myself that I need them to fill. I'm actually coming as a whole integrated human that feels filled up and vital and juicy in my own relationship with my wildness that is, accessed through the wild nature outside of me. And so I come to my partner, and I'm actually that polarity adds fuel to the relationship, because it's like, you don't need me, and there's not a desperation. And in fact, I really want that, because I can see that it's not a neediness. There's not a grabbing, because in my experience, the masculine often feels a sense of burden, and has that experience of like loneliness, a deep desire for love. And that's why the men's and women's journeys that my partner and I run look really different, because the masculine, in my experience and in his, craves spaciousness, to be free of burden, craves solo time. And so that's why my partner runs these programs, which a lot of it is men go off on their solos, and they spend most of the time, climbing the hill and doing that as a kind of sovereign journey. Whereas in the feminine craves love and connection. And so most of the journey we're together, and in that process of supporting each other, building that deep sense of belonging and kinship, and nourishing our nervous systems, then we get to a point where we can go off and do our solo work and that really work, because it's a big part, just even in that, bringing the nervous system along for the ride, a whole nother conversation there. But yes, something that I've really noticed with how we do it differently. None of it's right, like none of it's better or worse. It's just how we work differently. And when we could acknowledge that, we actually come better people for each other, and more whole people to each other. And we come to all our relationships, not just if you're in a heterosexual relationship, we come to all our relationships with a deeper sense of wholeness, which is, I think, a beautiful thing,
That's amazing. I love it what you talk about eros, because I often talk about that as well with the creativity. So we, when we're creative, that's what we're feeling. The feminine force is like the eros, and it comes up, and it's actually going to enhance your sexuality, but it's not like that. It's completely in a different viewpoint from like that, the neediness before, like, we would have talked about women using their bodies to get love in the wrong way, and that neediness. It's a completely different shift where it's creative, like co-creative in a relationship, so that it's emergent again, like you talked about. It's a total different shift, and I love what you say. It's so interesting to see that the two of you, yourself and your partner, doing retreats for men and women, and seeing the difference in that journey. I think that's so interesting, isn't it, Lisa?
Especially because you guys were both doing this before you met, right?
Yeah.
And then you met, and I remember Darvis saying, I've met this girl, and he's just like, she's just all these things and I'm just like, wow, how cool is that? And he lives in Tasmania and she lives in Byron Bay, and I'm like, wow, like, the universe has got to have something happening here that's like,
It was funny, when we first met, we actually didn't meet on a romantic level. We were planning on running a mixed gender journey together, like bringing the women's work that I do and the men's work that he does together, and running a mixed gender for anybody to come along. And it was actually when we met, we were like, oh.
Wow, that's amazing, isn't it? Your purpose,
so good.
Married
so
up.
Good.
Yeah, exactly.
Beautiful.
Part of it is that alignment of purpose.
Yeah.
So, Britt, we could talk forever, and I think we definitely should have more conversations, because it's just so engaging, these topics, and I think it's so pioneering. And what I love about it is it's almost like we each have a little piece of this. It's almost like we're speaking the same speak, but from different perspectives, which I think is such a wholesome and fulfilling conversation to have, because everyone's an individual and we all hear differently, and we can hear the same thing from different mouths, and one of them might really ring true. And so I think it's beautiful that we're all adding to this lovely little pot of juicy, delicious food that we've got here, that we're flavoring. So I think we should maybe have some more beautiful meals together via these conversations. And yeah, it's just wonderful. Thank you everyone for listening. And yeah, anything else you'd like to say, Carolyn? I feel so inspired after this conversation. I think there's just so much richness. And Brittany, you have just not held back on any of your knowing. And I love that, because, you know, that is, for me, it's like, let's put this information out there. And I love that you've just been so open with what you do and how you do it, and sharing so beautifully and authentically. And I really respect that, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. A big part of, I think, that something that impassions me is really dismantling this idea that, you know, there's a hierarchy of knowledge, or I know something and I'm going to hide it away. It's like everything that I've learned and come to know has been gifted to me through my experiences in nature. And this isn't, you know, my thing. This is wisdom that exists in every single one of us. There's cellular memory all encoded in every single one of our bodies that knows this. And I'm just lucky enough to have had the environmental conditions for it to actually arise again and come out and be expressed. I talk about, you know, every person is like a seed. We're all gifted with that internal blueprint to thrive, to have this deep ecological wisdom and sense of purpose and all the things to thrive. And some of us are unfortunately planted in a desert when we're meant to be planted in a rainforest. And even though that wisdom, that cellular knowing is there, it never really blossoms. And so really our journey of actually coming into ourselves is putting ourselves in the right environmental conditions to grow. And we access all of this. So yeah, I thank you for acknowledging that. But I feel like, I might have a teacher that says, let's dismantle the cult of the expert. Because
totally agree.
Absolutely.
You know, it's just that I've had the right conditions for this stuff to come through me, but it exists in every single one of us, because we're all human and we've all come out of the earth.
And I think this is the consciousness that we're moving into, where there is none of this power of the guru and this, you know, like that. There's an imbalance, and while maybe that served us before, now this is we're moving out of those sorts of power dynamics. So I totally hear you, and I think it's, you know, definitely, I love you talking about the seed, because Carolyn is always talking about the seed.
Always talking about the seed. Always on about the seed. Yeah. I'm like, oh my
seed.
God, oh my God, I've been talking out about this seed for so long. I can't believe Brittany's talking about the seed as well.
So we might be having to look at some wonderful mother-daughter retreats down there too, I think, Caroline.
Yes,
I'm excited about that. I think there's so much we could do.
Come up to Ireland when we'll go down there.
Come in Ireland, yeah.
Yeah, so and I absolutely love what you're saying, because I call it the innate wisdom of the heart. So you're just kind of connecting with that, but it's actually it's ancient wisdom rising, I call it as well, because it's like as if there's something being activated because of the environmental conditions of the earth and the planet is not happy. So it's calling its feminine force to rise up, and they have to come into purpose. They have to connect with this wisdom, and the earth is calling us, and we're just the midwives of that. So it's amazing to meet another midwife. Brittany, thank you so much. And everyone check out Brittany's contacts, and
they're on the bottom of the post. Yeah, she does some beautiful journeys, and go have a look and engage with them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you
so much, Brittany.
I look forward to many more chats in the future, and have a beautiful night. And thank you for everyone who joined in to listen for the conversation.
Yeah, thanks everybody watching. We just love your company, everyone. We hope you're enjoying the interviews. We'll see you again here on Monday. Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.